So we've had great speakers tonight and great speakers to come. The next great speaker is prominent Jewish anti-racist activist Rob Ferguson, the author of this booklet. Some of you might not have seen the stall that we have at the corner, so there'll be time at the end to go to the stall, books and other stuff on it. This is Anti-Semitism, the Far Right, Zionism and the Left. And Rob is on the steering committee of Free Speech in Israel. Rob.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Father, and thanks everybody. I want to start by thanking all those who've organised and participated in the big ride. It's a fantastic example of raising solidarity and awareness for Palestine. And all those who've organised solidarity with Palestine in Tower Hamlets here and beyond. Tonight we're here to stand with Palestine, that's the title of the meeting, and in defence of free expression and democracy. But as we meet this evening, in my mind's eye, I have those who have sacrificed the most. Those protesting at the Gaza fence, where over 210 Palestinians have been killed during the Great March of Return, which started last March, and more than 9,000 injured by live fire, often from snipers. The Palestinian villages on the West Bank, facing armed settlers whose olive groves are burned or bulldozed, the Palestinians whose homes and villages have been cleared while fortified settlements spread over the land that they once farmed and lived on. And the Palestinians holding nominal citizenship in Israel itself, but whose inequality is now enshrined in law. Those are realities. And when the IHRA working definition, I don't call it the definition, we should remember it is a working definition. Actually, to be precise, I'll cite the IHRA website, you can look it up. The non-legally binding working definition of anti-Semitism, which is promoted for adoption by local authorities, institutions and parties. We warned them that it could only serve to silence solidarity with Palestine. It's claimed that it's an international definition. It's a strange notion of internationalism. It has been adopted by only 8 governments, 6 member countries out of 31 who are part of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And we warned that adopting the IHRA working definition would have consequences. We've seen those consequences here last summer in Tower Hamlets, where justice for Palestine, after all, is a symbol of a wider struggle for many in the borough. The IHRA definition is framed on the basis of an unjustified and dangerous, in my view, conflation between criticism of the state of Israel and anti-Semitism. Therefore, it's not incidental that senior council officers in Tower Hamlets drew the conclusion that a charity event in aid of Palestinian children risked infringing the IHRA working definition, because their interpretation was rooted in the false conflation within the IHRA working definition itself. And that's why, at the very least, the Council should adopt the clarification that we're presenting in our petition on the 15th of January. And I'm going to read it out because I think it's important, the first part of it. It is not anti-Semitic without additional evidence to suggest that it displays anti-Jewish prejudice to criticise the government of Israel, or to criticise Zionism as a political ideology, or to describe any policy or law or practices of the state of Israel as racist, including acts leading to Palestinian dispossession as part of the establishment of the state, or to define Israel as an apartheid state, or to advocate boycott, disinvestment and sanctions against Israel. See, this definition and the wider narrative from which it's drawn, as Claire's pointed out so powerfully, has consequences far wider than Tower Hamlets. In the UK, we've seen campus meetings on Palestine banned or threatened with restrictions, the banning of anti-apartheid week events, and a chilling effect on pro-Palestinian voices, including within Muslim communities such as here in East London. And these consequences, as Claire has said, are not restricted to the UK. The German Bundestag has deemed the non-violent strategy of BDS called for by Palestinian civil society to be anti-Semitic. And I have to say, I find it absolutely chilling that in that Bundestag debate, the deputies of the far-right AfD, with neo-Nazi deputies at their core, bade for an outright legal ban on BDS and criminal prosecutions of anyone who supported it. What kind of topsy-turvy horror really is that? And in Germany and Austria, artists have been banned from festivals, been denied awards for just refusing to condemn BDS or refusing to play in Israel. The director of the Jewish Museum in Berlin was forced to resign for signing a document defending BDS against the charge of being anti-Semitic, even though he didn't himself support the BDS campaign. In the United States, the Trump administration is threatening Middle East studies programs in universities with withdrawal of funding. Academics have been hounded from their posts, campus meetings and campaigning for Palestine suppressed. This false conflation that is inscribed into the IHRA working definition underpins an attack on free expression and defence of Palestinian rights on an international scale. And there are other consequences, because the adoption of the IHRA definition by institutions and governments risks sending a message of impunity. This has consequences for Palestinians at the Gaza fence, for those facing daily harassment and attack from far-right settlers, and oppression from the Israeli state. When you delegitimize solidarity with the oppressed, this can only deepen oppression and injustice. And there's another consequence too. And speaking as a Jewish supporter of the Palestinian cause, I think a very dangerous one. The danger of degrading and devaluing the meaning of anti-Semitism itself, dividing those who have a common interest in fighting the rising forces of the far right that we see today, for whom anti-Semitism is an ideological weapon. Forces that cast Jews as the architects of what they call the Great Replacement, the supposed supplanting of white populations with Muslims, black people, migrants, and so on. And these narratives are no longer just on the fringe. They are entering the mainstream across Europe and the US, right up to the President of the United States talking of migrants as invaders and attacking Jewish financiers as representatives of global special interests. And we've seen the price paid in the massacres in Pittsburgh, Poway, Halle, Christchurch, and others. Because conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism gives the AfD in Germany, Viktor Orban, the leader of anti-Semitic leader of Hungary, the Austrian Freedom Party, Trump and the rest who promote these narratives, a get-out-of-jail-free card, claiming that because they support Israel, they can't be anti-Semitic. Support for or opposition to Israel is no test in itself of anti-Semitism. There are anti-Semites who declare support for Israel, as does most of the European far right actually. There are also anti-Semites who declare support for Palestinians. They are anti-Semites. Israel is no test, and this is the fundamental problem with the IHRA definition. I want to finish with how we take a stand, because even if others do not, we have to fight for common cause. We face rising forces on the far right on a scale that bring back echoes of the 1930s. We have to unite those who disagree on important questions against the threat of a common foe. My family includes Zionist, anti-Zionist, such as myself, of all political persuasions. But we should remember that at the gates of Auschwitz, the Nazis did not ask whether you were a Zionist Jew, an anti-Zionist Jew, a religious observant Jew, an atheist Jew, a communist Jew, a conservative Jew, only if your grandfather was a Jew. And they did not care when about my mother's sister's religious belief or her politics when she was sent to her death. So I would ask every councillor on the 15th of January, the mayor, to pause before considering the petition we're presenting, and I hope the vote to adopt its caveats, to think beyond the council chamber, to think beyond the internal debates in the Labour Party and elsewhere, but to think instead of the Palestinians protesting for human rights in Gaza and the West Bank, to think of the hard-won battles of the Labour movement for free speech and the right to protest, not least here in the East End, to think of the need to unite against the threat of the far right, yes, despite differences over Israel and Palestine. And I want to finish with this. We are now in the most important election campaign, I think, of my life. I'm not actually a Labour Party member, but I'm proud, I'm a member of the SWP, but I'm proud to share this platform with all the speakers and everyone who's spoken here tonight. And I'm sure we span some important different allegiances, whether within Labour, of no party, and so forth. But I think we share common ground. We all believe in the struggle for a different society, a world free of austerity, war, the threat of climate change, a world free of all forms of national oppression, anti-Semitism and racism, and for a world in which every Palestinian can be free.